Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me for Conversations with Alan. I'm Alan Locker, the child of two Holocaust survivors. I created this series to foster honest conversations about the rising tide of anti-Semitism and hate, and the responsibility each of us carries to confront intolerance wherever it appears. These discussions are meant to challenge us, broaden our understanding, and remind us that silence is never an option. Tonight's conversation speaks directly to that mission. We are focusing on a community where belonging is often complicated. LGBTQ plus individuals who wish to live fully and authentically within Orthodox Jewish life. For many, this is a space filled with tension, isolation, and questions about identity, faith, and home. Our guest this evening is Ely Winkler, who has lived that complexity. As the son of a modern Orthodox rabbi, Ely grew up deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. When he came out during his years at Yeshiva University, it meant navigating a path that few before him had walked openly. Today, through his work with Eshel, an organization dedicated to building LGBTQ plus inclusive Orthodox Jewish communities, Ely is helping transform those spaces from within. Eshel supports individuals and families, partners with rabbis and community leaders, and works to ensure that no one is forced to choose between their faith and their identity. I'm grateful to have him here tonight to share his personal journey and the important work Eshel is doing to build understanding, inclusion, and hope. Please welcome Ely Winkler to Conversations with Alan. Hey, Ely.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for having me on.
You are so welcome. Thanks for being here. As we discussed backstage, we are both Jersey boys. You grew up in Fort Lee, the son of a rabbi who led the community for decades. What was home like growing up, and what impressions did that early Orthodox Jewish environment leave on you?
Home life in a rabbi's home is first and foremost very intense. And it took me a few years to appreciate it, but intense in a very, very beautiful way. Our home was constantly filled with visitors and guests, traditions and Shabbat meals and holiday parties, warm food and tons of family and song. It kept me deeply rooted on a daily, weekly, Shabbat, monthly basis in the traditions of my forefathers and foremothers, and in the traditions of the Jewish Torah that really kept me rooted in strong values my whole life.
I love that. For viewers who may not be familiar with the term Orthodox, can you share what Orthodox Judaism means to you in terms of practice, community, and the values that you were raised with?
Absolutely. As we know, Judaism as a whole is just about 2% now, I think, a little bit more than 2% of the US population. And Orthodox Judaism is a percentage of that, a tiny percentage of that. So we're really dealing with a small population. And the home I grew up in is what is commonly referred to as Modern Orthodox. So we will observe the strict laws of Shabbat, such as not using electricity and going to synagogue, and we will observe the laws of kosher. But we refer to ourselves as a modern Orthodox community because we will watch TV and movies and engage in the world as a whole outside of just our Jewish traditions and values. So I grew up in a modern Orthodox home in Fort Lee, New Jersey, where I was lucky enough to learn and engage with the world at large, outside of just my Jewish traditions. Many of the folks that Eshel works with are from ultra-Orthodox backgrounds and from more Orthodox backgrounds where there is much more limited exposure to the outside world, outside of their traditions.
Do those communities mix? And so you grew up in a modern, and what would the other Orthodox be called? Is there another term?
There's numerous terminologies such as Hasidic or Haredi. Chabad is a version of that ultra-Orthodoxy as well.
Like I said,
the communities in general are actually fairly separate and don't overlap very often. Especially amongst Hasidic Jews, there are sects that really carry deep-rooted traditions over from Eastern Europe that are very different from one sect to another, even amongst the Hasidic population.
And in Fort Lee, was there a modern Orthodox community, or were there multiple Orthodox communities?
In Fort Lee and Bergen County, New Jersey as a whole, there's an extremely large modern Orthodox population.
Okay. And, I was 2 towns over. I didn't fully even realize that. After leaving, I believe, Yeshiva Day School, a gap year in Israel, and then college, you said you struggled to find where you fit in within the Orthodox world. Can you share what you were feeling, what that period of not feeling at home in your own community was like for you?
Certainly. As is common in many religious communities, the heteronormativity of you will get married in your early 20s to a member of the opposite gender, and you will, as soon as you are ready, have kids and be able to pass on the traditions to the next generation. And when you deviate from that standard, you can feel quite marginalized. There's so many conversations, lectures, and even Torah study dedicated to building a family in a heteronormative framework, and what your wedding should look like and what your future should look like. And when you know that you're a little bit different, especially if you're LGBTQ, you know that those aren't going to apply to you, and it can feel quite othering.
I can imagine, and scary.
Yeah. And there are certain traditions and rituals that married people will participate in and single people will not necessarily participate in. And if you get married later or you stay single for any reason, this applies to straight people as well, you can continue to feel marginalized and othered.
I thought this was really interesting. If you were involved in helping organize the groundbreaking 2009 panel at Yeshiva University about being gay in the modern Orthodox world before you were publicly out, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm lucky enough to have been one of the players behind the scenes to my amazing friends that were able to be out of the closet and really do the work at the time.
What was it like for you to contribute to something without being, I guess, yourself being able to be yourself?
For me, the most important thing was that the panel and the event happened. I knew I was navigating a personal journey, and something like speaking publicly about my own identity and sexuality that I was still navigating at the time didn't feel particularly comfortable. But I knew that the conversation needed to be had. So those that were ready to share about their identities were able to speak. And I was thrilled to just have a small part in making sure that they got the reservation for the booking of the room at Yeshiva University.
Well, having that happen at your school and knowing what you were navigating, what you heard there, did it help you in any way?
It was simply a sigh of relief to see hundreds of students and people coming from off campus as well, lined up just to hear our stories. The panelists were not there to engage in debate about what is or is not permissible according to the Torah. They were simply there to share their stories, and having hundreds of modern Orthodox Jews show up to hear our stories was a watershed moment. It really was.
That's amazing. I think we all feel the same way. I mean, whatever community you are in, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community coming out, I feared losing, my father, who, never knew I was gay, friends. I know you felt you might lose people in your community. How did that affect, your sense of identity and belonging, that fear of losing the people who hugged you as a boy?
It was probably one of the hardest things, not simply people that may have chosen not to engage with me after coming out, but it was actually more dire, just the fear beforehand. The fear of what this or that person is going to say. And no matter how much they loved me, they believed that there was something in the Bible that meant that they could no longer love me. And the fear that that would be their instinct to say, oh, well, I no longer love you. That took over any idea of acceptance, at least while I was thinking about coming out. Once I came out.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, and I'm hundreds of people like I do, we all feared, but it's so interesting. We feared in different ways. And I don't know, I mean, it seems like I can understand how religion, no matter what religion really too, right? Like so many who try to come out in whatever religious belief they are a part of, that's a different thing. Like if the, I didn't fear the Bible, but like if you're fearing how people react to that, that just sounds heavier to me. And not to, I'm not, your fear is heavier than mine, but it just is a heavy subject, it sounds like, and especially to a young person.
It was incredibly heavy, and I think one of the most challenging things, certainly in 2008, 9, 10, around that time that I was coming out, was that there was no resources or outlets for my questions or for my identity search. There were no rabbis that had answers for me. There were a few that I had spoken to, that I had warm conversations with, but the conversations did not provide me a framework or hope for building a future in the community that I loved so dearly, which was the Modern Orthodox community.
Michael, who is a friend and watches my shows, has faced the same issues with Catholicism, he says, and he still lives in fear. He's watching us right now. And that, that breaks my heart, that people are still, but, it is about representation. It is about you speaking. I mean, the fact that you didn't have those resources. I mean, I say this a lot lately because people always ask, like, when did I know I was gay? Or, when did you come out? I grew up in the 80s. There was nobody. I didn't know what it meant. I know what I liked or did, but I had no idea. There was nothing. So thank you, for being here and speaking, because I think that is the important, and it breaks my heart that Michael lives in fear, like that anyone is still living in fear.
Absolutely. One of the things that is so central to that Bible verse understanding, which I'm sure we'll come back to a few times, is simply that we are tasked in most religions to not judge one another, that we are not the judges of one another. And so the concept that this one verse is going to be used to oppress or marginalize, I don't think there's any religion that would say that was the intention of a verse provided in the Bible. It's simply human nature and the nature of communities and protecting tradition and religion, that the fear turns into marginalization or discrimination. But it's not by any means a commandment of the religion.
Mm-hmm. Talk about, at different points throughout your journey, you explored many Jewish spaces, including LGBTQ focused communities and non-Orthodox synagogues, and none of them made you feel like you do in Orthodoxy. What made you realize that is where you needed to be despite everything?
There were a number of layers of exploring a journey. And I think like many other people, a lot of it was growing up. A lot of it was maturity. It was really my 20s and early 30s that I wanted to explore. I wanted to see what was out there. I wanted to understand if there were places in this world where I saw myself more than I saw myself in the modern Orthodox community, especially after feeling marginalized once I came out of the closet. So I explored a number of other communities that really, for me, just didn't hit home. And it's a very hard thing to describe, but modern Orthodoxy to me is home. Mm. And when I would go into a different synagogue, there would often be some different liturgy in the services. There would almost always be different tunes and different songs. Mm-hmm. And that felt almost like a different religion entirely. I knew the Hebrew words, but I didn't know the songs, and I didn't know their tunes because it was coming from their movement's tradition. And my tradition was different. And it was pretty much around the breakout of the October 7th war that I really felt motivated to go back to my roots and the traditions that raised me and the community that I had called home for so long. And at the time, the way I framed it was, I'm going to hang up my discomfort at the door. Mm. I was ready to say I didn't care if the community maybe was uncomfortable with me being an openly gay person. It was more important that I connected with my home and my community and that I had a space to pray. As part of that journey, I reconnected with my friends and the executive director of Eshel, Miriam Kabakov. And
was she a friend prior? She was a friend prior?
Yes, I had been aware of Eshel's work and spoken to many participants as well as many of the staff for a number of years. I had been aware of them. And Miriam invited me to volunteer and help them with a big celebration in June of 2024. And when I walked into that room, I saw over 300 Orthodox rabbis, teachers, parents, aunts, uncles, and LGBTQ people all in one room celebrating Eshel. And I said to myself literally that night, modern Orthodoxy has changed and I'm ready to come back.
Wow.
I saw over a period of 15 years, as Eshel was founded just about in 2010, right around when I came out, how there really has been a slow and steady bending of the arc, if you will, movement of inclusion and belonging, and an understanding of the LGBTQ experience and the recognition that it's not in direct contradiction with biblical values, but there are ways to live a true Orthodox life.
Wow. And you volunteered first before joining the staff, correct?
Correct.
Talk about how you ended up as the director of advancement, right?
That's right. So for all my years exploring different communities, one thing stayed true for me, which was my desire to work in Jewish day schools and yeshiva day schools. I have 11 nieces and nephews in the yeshiva day school
Wow.
system, whom I love tremendously. And I wanted to make sure that their education was up to par. Whatever I could do to help make the yeshiva day school system stronger and make sure that my nieces and nephews had a strong education, that's what I wanted to do professionally. It was over those years that I still stayed in the Jewish community, and I learned fundraising in yeshiva day schools. The Ramaz school on the Upper East Side in particular is where I was for about 8 years. And I was able to understand how the Jewish community organizes on a financial level, on a lay leadership level, on a spiritual leadership level. And by learning some of those systems of how our community takes care of each other and looks after one another, I knew I wanted to bring what I had learned to LGBTQ Orthodox community, whatever that meant, because there really wasn't much at the time. But professionally, I was so grateful to have that background in fundraising and in, strategically understanding the Jewish movement and the Jewish community in order to bring that to Eshel.
I think it's incredible. Like I said, and I didn't say this to you, backstage, but I grew up Jewish, my parents being Holocaust survivors. But I grew up at a time where, I think being afraid of coming out and I think anti-Semitism in small ways as a teenager, I didn't readily admit that I was Jewish. I think due to, possibly not understanding everything and not even understanding that I am here because of the brave people who risked their lives to save my mother and father. It took me, like you said, sort of coming to that adulthood to learn. And I think it's so important. It was really for me also Charlottesville that when I wanted to use my voice, but I didn't have a platform and didn't know how to use my voice because my parents were no longer here. And I thought, what would they have thought of that? Like that was a new level of anti-Semitism to me.
Right.
So, kudos to you for just diving in.
Thank you.
Diving in, I think it's, especially like you said, after October 7th. You said 2010. Sorry that I just, went into it.
Please.
2010, Eshel was formed. What was their mission at that time? Is it the same? Has the mission stayed the same?
The mission has always primarily been to allow LGBTQ Jews to participate in the community of their choice, coming from a place of, if I'm born into an Orthodox or modern Orthodox community, I shouldn't feel like I have to leave just because I'm LGBTQ. So it works kind of on an external and on an internal. I shouldn't have to leave, and anybody should be able to be Orthodox if they want to, even if they're LGBTQ. When Eshel first started in 2010, one of the first things they did was a Shabbaton, which is a term for a Shabbat weekend away, very often at a retreat center, or in a neighborhood or a community. So Eshel began by hosting the first ever of its kind Orthodox LGBTQ Shabbaton, and brought together about 100 participants to a retreat center. And it was the first level of work with this population, and it really was base level support work. It was healing. It was talking to people about their struggles and their identities. And it was giving people hope, because there had never been a gathering of this kind. Many of the participants that were there had spent many, many years feeling like the only ones experiencing the struggle or the conflict of being LGBTQ and observant. And the first thing that needed to happen was just support and a lot of healing work.
Well, it sounds like you walking into that room of 300 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing.
And I was at that first Shabbaton in 2010, but I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to dive into being Orthodox and LGBTQ. As we discussed, I was getting antsy to start looking elsewhere.
So what was that like? Because I assume you knew deep down that you were gay at that time, but you just weren't comfortable in sharing it with the group, right?
Well, the group is for LGBTQ, so I was out enough
to
come
to
yes,
that. Gotcha.
But I wasn't ready to choose Orthodoxy yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, the mission involves supporting individuals today, parents, rabbis, and institutions.
So the support work is really LGBTQ individuals and parents. That's supporting them in navigating their journeys. Parents, especially when their teens come out, or their young adults come out, and LGBTQ adults. The work expanded over that since then, because we realized it wasn't enough to just put Band-Aids on wounds. But we wanted to start addressing what was creating the wounds in the first place. We would get phone calls saying, I haven't been to a synagogue because I'm LGBTQ, but my parent just passed away. Where can I go to say the Kaddish prayer? And we began to realize that people needed more than one Shabbat or one gathering a year. They needed full communities, and that wasn't something that one nonprofit could just give them, ta-da. But through this kind of need, we developed the Welcoming Shuls project, where we began to reach out to one synagogue at a time, to talk to their rabbis about whether or not the synagogue was LGBTQ friendly, whether it could be, whether the rabbi was willing to have a conversation about it. We weren't calling them to say, you must do ABC. We weren't calling them to say, to berate them or shame them, but we were calling to find out where our community members could be safe and comfortable. And 10 years later, we have connected with over 300 synagogues, Orthodox synagogues across the United States and Canada.
That's incredible.
Now I won't give specific numbers, but not all of those 300 are welcoming. But the point is that we've had a conversation with them, and we've started to see how that conversation really does open doors.
Yeah, I mean, what a conversation that must be. I kind of would love to just hear how Eshel is articulating it, and I would love to know what the synagogue is.
At the root of the message of that conversation, it's something that most people would find fairly simple and fairly basic. Just since when do we believe in kicking people out of our religion? From everything I've learned and grown up to believe in, we want to hold Jews close. We want to hold each other closer. We want to keep each other connected to God and to our traditions and to our values. And the idea of all of a sudden someone would be rejected, that is the first thing that really doesn't make sense. when you look at the work, and those are often how the conversation starts, and will often continue into what you're talking about here, which is somewhat of a role play with the rabbi. And we'll say, if you had a congregant come to you, what would you tell them? And we often will ask the rabbi to engage in a conversation like that in order to help them really hear the struggle and practically understand what they're asking from their congregants when they do or do not make their spaces inclusive.
As someone who struggled, how does it feel being part of an organization that is doing this work to help change what you yourself went through?
It's something that from the moment I came out of the closet, I knew I wanted to do. I growing up as the son of a rabbi, it wasn't enough for me to just be okay for myself, but I have an incredible community leader of a father who wanted to share his traditions and values with everyone around him. And it continues to not be enough for me that I find my peace, but that I'm able to share that message with as many people as possible, in order to help everyone find the type of support that I've found through Eshel.
What does your family think of the work you're doing?
I'm incredibly, tremendously lucky and blessed to have a very loving and supportive family.
That's really, I mean, not only being Orthodox, but the son of a rabbi. Just, I can't imagine that added. It's got to be pressure. I mean, I don't know another word, but it does, and that had to have weighed heavily on you as well.
It certainly did, and it also gave me unique tools and unique conversations to have with my father, and unique understanding of the Jewish community at large. That if I didn't have that understanding, I might have walked away, and I might have seen Judaism as immovable or as a, backwards, old school, oppressive type of religion. But because I learned from my father, the rabbi, I saw the way that the Bible has so many answers and has so many beautiful lessons for all of us, even in the 21st century, that I don't know that I would have stayed or that I would be as committed today if I wasn't his son.
What lessons do you think you learned from him that are helping you? I'm sure everything, but are there lessons you could particularly articulate that you think, like you remember, as a child or something?
My father is incredibly passionate about the characters of the Bible, of the Old Testament. And he taught those stories at an elementary school and middle school level his whole career, as well as to a synagogue of congregants. And the way he brought out the humanity of these forefathers and foremothers and the complexities of who they were, and the humanity of who they were, as opposed to putting them on a pedestal or presenting these stories as black and white biblical mythologies, but rather diving into the humanity of the characters. That's something that really inspires me. My father's also a Jewish history buff. And, we are nothing if not for what came before us. And as a Jew, as an American, on so many levels, it's so important for me to understand the world that came before us, the LGBTQ movements that came before my time, and of course, our Jewish history.
I need to come to an Ely Winkler class. I need to learn more through you. I think that's,
Thank you.
and it is, I mean, as you October 7th changed everything. I mean, the outward anti-Semitism that we are seeing is just beyond anything, you know,
Yeah.
anything that
There,
should be happening.
it was a unique time when I accepted this role at Eshel, um, because LGBTQ Jews were, to a certain extent, facing a triple threat. We were facing anti-Semitism on the rise. We were facing the continued discrimination that LGBTQ Orthodox Jews face from Orthodox people to the right of them. And we were facing, of course, the discrimination from the LGBTQ community towards towards the situation or the war in Israel. It was a really complicated conversations to have over those months with all of my friends, no matter what they believed in. Every conversation was hard.
How did you start those conversations? And how would you recommend somebody starting those conversations?
The same way we start our advocacy work at Eshel, which is with the humanity behind it, with the human stories. Um, my parents retired to Israel 10 years ago.
Wow.
And so for me, it became even more personal. Israel was always very special. I'm very lucky to have grown up visiting there many times. And once they moved there, it became particularly personal to follow
Yeah,
the
sure.
news and to follow the political landscape and to understand what they were experiencing.
Yeah,
So
I
to
did.
be able to speak to my friends, Jewish, non-Jewish, pro, anti, wherever they are, and start a conversation by saying, I'm really worried about my parents. That's a conversation starter.
Hmm.
And it's not, as you and I know well, there's no competition for
Mhm.
emotions in this world. There's no one worry or one struggle is more or worse. That there's enough room, unfortunately, for everyone to struggle in this world. But being able to start by sharing what I was experiencing, that was a very helpful tool for helping me feel seen.
Mm.
Um, and in a time where people were telling me, don't, you're not safe with your LGBTQ friends, you're not safe out in the community right now. I knew that I could have conversations. Um, and and it can lead to, and it would often lead to disagreements at the end of the conversation, but the point was it was a conversation.
Right.
One of the biggest things that Eshelites experienced, so actually right after I started this work, Eshel ran a survey last fall on anti-Semitism as experienced by LGBTQ Jews since October 7th, 2023.
Wow.
And we discovered that over 80% of respondents, which was over 300 respondents, had experienced significant or severe discrimination online. They'd been blocked or harassed in their DMs or in comments. That was the criteria we asked. And we found that 42% of LGBTQ Jews were no longer engaging in LGBTQ spaces, or engaging but withholding parts of themselves back.
Wow.
So they would engage but put away their Jewish star necklace, or they would engage but not talk about their family in Israel.
Not at all. I bring it out even more, and I didn't wear one for many years, but again,
Right.
October 7th changed a lot.
Yeah.
Changed a lot. And
So
I can't
it
imagine
was a,
having, you know, I have, friends over there, but, parents, and worrying about your parents. That's heavy.
Certainly, um, what I'm lucky enough to have been able to find my community to go back to, my synagogue to pray for peace and safety. And that's what helped carry me through, really.
Michael just asked, because you were talking about the respondents to the survey. Have you personally experienced some of those comments and DMs?
So I haven't personally experienced. I've chosen to not engage with much political conversation online. I've chosen not to post memes or infographics that would lead to heated DM conversations because I get anxiety about texting people the right thing. It's as
Oh
simple as
yeah,
that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Misinformation is so prevalent, and I do want to share things, and I do share things, and then I will
Right.
find out, oh, that was incorrect, and I'll pull it down because I don't want to do that as well. So
Right. So I was able to now, did my friends post slogans or rhetoric or takes that I vehemently disagreed with that I may consider anti-Semitic? Yeah, I saw that. I don't consider that me experiencing hate.
right,
I saw someone post something that I disagree with. That's different.
yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that as well. Princess Goose, who's watching, said, "I'm Christian, but I feel for the Jewish people and all that they've suffered throughout history. I hope Ellie's parents remain safe."
Thank you.
You mentioned stories earlier, and sharing stories. Are there stories? Not that you share someone's name or something, but a story of someone whose life or community changed because of the work that Eshel is doing that has stuck with you. Your own story sticks with you, but is there something the work Eshel is doing today that has stuck with you?
It's an excellent question. There a simple story is we have a project called the Orthodox Allies Training. So we will go to a community and invite as many friends and friends of friends as we can to a living room to have a conversation about what it would mean to be an LGBTQ ally in an Orthodox community. We were having this conversation with about 30 or 40 parents in the room. And at the end of the conversation, two different sets of parents raised their hand and said, "We've never told anyone this, but our child is LGBTQ." In a room of 30 to 40 people. And I've learned a lot about the parent journey since starting my work at Eshel and what a parent goes through, especially as LGBTQ people come out younger and understand their identities at a younger age with access to more education and more information. Parents are very often did not have the same information that their children now have access to.
You said there was no information.
Right. So it's been really, really moving to be able to connect with parents in this way and to see them be able to find each other and support each other. Because we very often hear that they feel like they have their own closet, like they have their own secret, like no one in their community knows that their child is going through this. And it's something that they keep under wraps. And it's a really fascinating experience. But similar to the LGBTQ experience, we created a parent Shabbaton, a parent retreat. And we are able to bring these parents together for one weekend a year as well and really foster a community where they don't have to feel alone, regardless of what their children are going through.
That's amazing. I can imagine. I mean, if an Orthodox child feels so afraid, right, to come out in his community, that a parent would feel
Right.
possibly even more so to share that.
Right.
To share that. Before I let you go, what would you say to an Ellie who's watching tonight, and to parents? What would your advice be, who are afraid, to choose between their faith and identity?
My advice is you don't have to choose. It's a little bit of a superhero cliche, but it really has guided me well. There's always a third option. And for me, the only way to understand my identity as a Jewish person and as a gay person was to hold on to both of them and not choose one over the other. There are so many resources today, like Eshel, and youth organizations and other Jewish organizations that will support an LGBTQ person who needs support. But at the base level, there needs to be more understanding that there's nothing inherently anti-religious about being LGBTQ. When you go to a synagogue, even an Orthodox synagogue, the rabbi doesn't ask you at the door if you've eaten a cheeseburger that week. So too, the rabbi and no one in the congregation should be asking anyone, straight or LGBT, about what they're doing in the bedroom that week. And at a base level, there needs to be, and Eshel continues to build this, continues to move forward this shift in perception that discrimination is not in line with our Jewish values. And we have to remove that perception of discrimination and recognize the diverse complexity of every human identity. What Eshel has seen is that the more we bring LGBTQ people into Orthodox communities, the more vibrant those communities become.
Of course.
I now have LGBTQ friends who are in couples, are married with children in their Orthodox shul. And I know, I personally will read from the Torah or lead services or give a class for my community as part of my normal routine. And that is what was missing from my life, my ability to give back to my community and be part of my community. So it really, there really is so much opportunity out there if Orthodox shuls can and will continue to open their minds and their hearts to LGBTQ people.
As long as Eshel keeps knocking on their doors, they will.
Yes. I want to say there's a phrase that we came up with over the last few years about our work, which is we make the case for LGBTQ inclusive orthodoxy. And making the case stands for community, advocacy, support, and education. With those 4 pieces of work, we have seen orthodoxy move forward. We have seen more people open their doors. We have seen more allyship, more families stay together, more committed, observant Jews, and more beauty from our communities.
I mean, that's a reason to go to work right there. That's a reason
Absolutely.
to go to work. Any aspirations to follow in Dad's footsteps?
Am I
the first person to ask you that?
Far from it.
Yeah, I would think.
There's just one Orthodox institution that, as of a year ago, will give rabbinic ordination
to an LGBTQ,
to an openly LGBTQ person. But that is just as of a year ago. So it hasn't really been an option for much of my life,
I
but I
did not realize
appreciate,
that. I did
yeah,
not realize. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So it, you know, I do love learning and I do love teaching. So it's always something that I've thought about. And maybe now it's something I can think about more seriously.
well, absolutely. The work you guys are doing will open those, hearts and minds for sure.
Thank you.
For sure. Ellie, thank you so much. Incredible conversation. Thank you for your openness and sharing your
Of
journey, because I
course.
really do think it helps.
Of course. I really, as I said to you, you know, even before we jumped on, the more people that know about our work, the better. It's the more people that know that if they need someone to talk to confidentially, we have confidential therapists, and we have um, a network of support groups and Zoom meetups that are all staffed. If someone, you know, needs a parent support group, we have those too. And if someone needs to talk to their rabbi or their day school, we can help them with that too. So really, really, for anyone who is thinking about it, questioning about it, doesn't understand what this might mean, that they might be LGBTQ and Orthodox, they should know that Eshel is here for them.
EshelOnline.org for everybody.
That's it.
And the link, if it's not up, I will make sure it's up when we say goodnight. But thank you so much. Happy holidays to you.
Absolutely. You too. You too. A happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. My heartfelt thanks to Ely Winkler for spending the evening with us and for sharing his journey, truly with such honesty and courage. And again, to learn about Eshel's work in creating inclusive Orthodox communities, please visit EshelOnline.org. As we close tonight, I hope this conversation reminds us that every one of us has a role to play in building communities rooted in dignity, empathy, and belonging. Speaking up, choosing compassion, and confronting hate, even when it's difficult, is how real change begins. Conversations like this can open hearts, as he said, shift perspectives, and move us towards a world where no one is asked to choose between who they are and where they come from. As I leave you, remember we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard thing, and let's all fight hate for good. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. War and hate, certainly not the answer. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends and family. And until the next conversation, please stay safe and happy holidays, everybody.